I just, it's so fun to watch people exactly where God intended them to be. And boy, my heart is burdened for that senior pastor who feels the need to do it all because they worry that the congregation would think, what are we paying you for?
So I just told you I'm not going to do like the whole my guest today thing. But I was thinking, like, if I were to introduce Heather traditionally, I would say Heather Fleece is a lifelong veteran youth worker and the world's hardest hugger.
Oh!
That's what I was going to say.
And those are two true statements.
No, you're so much more than that. And people get to hear that, but it's like your signature. You're hugging.
Yes.
And the if people aren't watching this, Heather's wearing a halo. Right? It's a halo.
Yeah, it is a headband that has a halo.
Well, yeah, but you live in headbands.
I do. And people think, oh, how cute. She put it on for the podcast. I'm like, nope, this is literally daily wear. It's just a matter of which 150 of my headbands do I want to choose for the day.
So they go with mood or color coordination or...
Today it was outfit. I had a lunch for a local ministry, a women's lunch, and the room had 500 people. I was wearing a really cute, like, cream dress that it matched well with. But I also thought if somebody needs to locate me in that room of 500 people, I want them to see the halo above the heads of everyone else. And it indeed did work.
And if they said she's the one with the halo and there's more than one, that'd be really alarming. Wouldn't it?
It would be exceptional.
Like, so I could come to a luncheon with you, and if I had a headband on, we could really confuse people. Like, who's who?
We could. But you'd be amazed. You'd be amazed, Tim, at how even the halo, especially, will start conversations.
Of course.
Like our server.
No, I wouldn't be amazed.
A server came up at breakfast. I was meeting with someone and like bowed, and I said, "You're welcome." I'm like, you didn't know you were going to be serving an angel today, did you? And then I had another conversation with a guy one time when I was wearing it, and we ended up talking about faith and whether or not we think we have guardian angels or if angels are not assigned to individual people.
Okay, now just a minute. So my mind just went to you. You wear this in public too? Like if you were in a restaurant?
Oh, yeah. I did this morning. I wear it at Costco.
Well, you said a server came up.
Yeah. So I wear them. I wear them on a daily basis. It's not like a shtick. It's like part of my outfit because it's functional too, because it really does hold my hair back in a way that it's a headband, like a girl would wear a headband. But no, I've got these orange pom-poms, and they literally are on springs. So they go back and forth. But they're so light, I forget I have them on. So I'll be at Costco and I'll be like, wow, people are so friendly. Hi. Like people are just smiling at me and I totally forget that I have it on.
It's like people calling you by name and you forgot you were wearing a name
tag. Yes, exactly.
How did you know my name?
Yeah. Oh, your name tag.
Well, Bill.
Yeah.
It's on your shirt.
Yeah, so I'm wearing my halo today for you.
Yeah, the camera came on and boom, there you were in all your glory. I love it. Well, listen, it's Friday. It's the end of I'm sure I've been needing extra days and extra hours lately. I thought I had that under control a couple months ago, but the last couple months have been a little breakneck. And I just left the office a couple hours ago and went up and saw my mom. She doesn't live far from me. And she's 83, going to be 84. She's struggling with her memory, dementia, all kinds of things. And she was asking how I was. And I said, well, my heart rate has been like 130 beats a minute, which is super unusual for me. And my blood pressure has been like an hypertension 2 level or what that is. I've never had high blood pressure, high heart rate. I'm pretty physically active and fairly good shape for a 53-year-old man. And so as I'm looking at this day going, oh my gosh, I've got so much to do. And I've got Heather at 4 and I've already like stood you up twice. So Thanks for. I'm really excited because
Yeah,
first of all, this is going to be like the longest conversation we've ever had.
it will be. Isn't that amazing? The longest time we have shared space outside of a family funeral, which can we really call that shared space?
No,
Yeah.
you really can't.
No, we can't. Yeah. And we get to talk
Yeah.
about the thing that matters to us the most outside of Jesus, and that's doing his work.
And the question is how we do the
Mm-hmm.
work.
Mm-hmm.
You and I've talked about this 2 or 3 times that it's crazy that in our like 3 decades of ministry, running in the same circles,
Mm-hmm.
the most we've encountered each other is in a hallway or an elevator or
Mm-hmm.
something like that for
Mm-hmm.
30
A
seconds. And
van. I
hey,
think
how
there
are
was
you?
a van one time. Mm-hmm.
There probably was.
Yeah.
There's always
A
a
shuttle
van.
van. A shuttle van. A
Somebody
super
picks
shuttle
you up to
van.
take you to a
That's
conference at,
exactly right.
3 in the morning or take you back
Mm-hmm.
to the conference. And so I'm really excited, and I'm not overselling that just because I'm going to learn something today, and I'm
Hmm.
not being patronizing. I'm going to learn something. I know that God's going to teach us both something, I hope, but I'm going to glean. Uh, I know I'm going to glean the most because I've got a couple questions because there's things about you that entice and attract me to
Hmm.
your personality, your
Mm-hmm.
style of ministry, just your authentic self. We might as well
Mm-hmm.
use the word and get it right out there. The last time that we were actually, other than the funeral,
Mm-hmm.
the day before the funeral, the day after the funeral, or the week before the funeral, was your birthday party.
It's true.
And you were wearing a headband with antenna or something,
Uh-huh. It said
antennae.
it's party time. Mm-hmm.
And so our friend Ken said, well, you can go interrupt her. But what I know about you from a conversation we had recently, which I love, is that you don't let people interrupt you when you are in a conversation with others.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote that down in my notes today. This very first word I've got was you practice presence.
Hmm.
We all know how important that is. I suck at it, to be 100% honest with
Hmm.
you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably from my body language. People are able to tell that he is not fully with me,
Hmm.
right? But not only your hugs, but your undivided attention that you give to the person in front of you at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Has that always been your signature trait?
I can point back to Bethel College and the skyways in between the buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And I came alive in college, Tim. So I grew up in Owatonna, Minnesota, a smaller town in southern Minnesota. And I felt like I had to fight upstream all the time in public schools. So I love Jesus. I wanted to be obedient. I'm a rule follower as much as it doesn't seem to match my personality. Um, and I so I was doing everything that I was supposed to do, right? Being respectful to my teachers and not drinking and not smoking and not having sex. I like to say I didn't have a lot of opportunity to have sex, but I still wasn't having sex. And I I finally came to a place at Bethel where other people were swimming in the same direction that I was swimming in a Christian university. And to be around that and to be learning and to be having my faith poured into, to be able to be friends with guys and not have it be weird, it all just awoke truly. I think who I am today, so much of that was fashioned and came alive at Bethel. But I remember my extroverted self just loving being in those hallways in the passing. And I would be talking with a friend, and I can picture it in one of those skyways. And that friend, it was like every person who passed, he'd be like, "Hey, Jace. Hey, Kelly." And then he'd come back to me, and then he would just do it again and do it again. And I just remember feeling, and this was long before these came into being, just feeling like, "Hey, wait, what about me?" And I really started to say, I don't like how that felt, and I don't want people to feel like that when they're with me. And so I remember even in those hallways, just starting to put my blinders on. That's what I call it. I literally ignore
Mm-hmm.
everybody else except for the person that's in front of me. And I want to make people feel like they're the only person in the world to me at that moment, because I know when that happens to me, the value that I feel and the love that I feel from that person. And so I'd say it started that I probably 19, 20 years old. And then, as I entered into youth ministry, I was like, wow, this matters even more to these
Yeah.
kids. So it's kind of a even more of a tenacious part of me now, because especially when I'm at church, I'll be talking to a kid and adults will come up and try to get my attention, and they'll go like this. And I literally will not acknowledge anything. They'll tap me on the shoulder. I won't acknowledge. Some of them do that back rub, which annoys me even more. And I won't acknowledge. And then they'll often just walk away. With kids, it's a little easier. They run up, they have no social space. They get in my face and I go, Kyle, I'm in another conversation right now. And then they'll back away. But my kids learn and my kids know. But it is really, really important to me.
So it's a teachable moment. It's a teachable moment that some of us have just not learned. My wife, Cindy, says it all the time, because she's pretty good at she's so much better than I am at being fully engaged and fully present in a conversation. But then she gets really annoyed. I don't know if you get annoyed, but she'll get annoyed and she'll come home, and so we'll be in a public place or church setting or event, and she'll go, that person has no understanding. Like, do you have no understanding that you stand, you politely wait your turn, or because what am I supposed to do? Turn my attention away from this person? That's just rude.
Yeah. Well, and for kids, they have a limited time with me, Tim. You can call me on a Thursday at 2:00. You can swing by my office on Monday afternoon. They can't. In their minds, that's when I get Heather. And so I want to give them Heather in those moments.
Well, it's really hard to tell them from a platform, a stage, a microphone, that you're important, you mean something, I love you, Jesus loves you.
Yes.
And then they get the same response or behavior. Sometimes they get at home, sometimes they get at school, but in public in general, where I can easily be dismissed. And again, somebody else is vying for my attention. And so I really needed just that moment, even if it wasn't a long time, like when you say your students they have limited time.
Yep.
And again, it might not be a long time. I mean, you minister to a lot of students.
Yeah.
And I know you've got an amazing team, which I'm certain that your practice of presence, I have to think that it's one of your qualifications.
Yes, it is. And it's one thing I train real hard on.
Yeah. Well, and even if you train on it, though, it's contagious.
Yeah.
It has to be contagious. So again, if they don't see you practice, I wrote a blog this week, and I heard a phrase last week when I was in meetings in DC. I've never heard it before anyway. And that was, you shouldn't practice what you preach. You should preach what you practice. And I thought, that makes so much more sense. Because if I just practice what I preach, so in other words, I'm telling you something that I want you to do. You should be present and notice people and give them your undivided attention. And I can say that to my team, my staff, congregation, an event, whatever it might be. But then in the line, the book table or the event registration or the church, entryway, if they don't see you, they can smell that. Adults can smell that. I mean, kids can really smell that.
Sure.
But I think adults can really smell it because maybe it opens up a wound that they've carried since they were that 13-year-old eighth grader. And young lady who just needed somebody to pay attention. And then all of a sudden, I'm 43 and you're still not doing it.
Yeah. So, I like that. You have to preach what you practice. And then isn't my platform of preaching so much more powerful? Because in this instance, my volunteer staff, they're thinking, she's not asking me to do anything she's not doing. She's preaching what she's doing. I like that.
Isn't that good?
Yeah, that's really good.
I mean, I wrote that down. I'm going to use it 4 or 5 times in a podcast, and then I'm going to trademark it and steal it. You
Well, that's
know,
what we do in youth ministry.
that's what we do. That's what we do in ministry. Preach what
Ministry
you
in general,
practice.
yeah.
At Timothy Eldred, you know. And so I'm going to make my own little quote meme kind of thing, you know, put a little banner, put my name under it.
You have enough
For
people
like a
share
week
it,
or so.
it'll
Well,
be
yeah, for a
yours
week or so,
forever.
I'll put anonymous under it.
And then you'll
and then
take
I'll
the
forget
credit.
where I heard it. And then pretty soon I'll just get rid of anonymous. And it's mine. And then if I can put a trademark on it, I can sell it later. There you go. I'm going to use it a lot. I mean,
it's
not original with me, but it's so good. And I thought about that last week as I was writing, this week as I was writing a couple resources for pastors. That's kind of, it might become a tagline or a mantra of this project. You know, preach what you practice.
Yeah.
Then I have to think like I wouldn't have a lot of sermons to share because I make up a lot of stuff that sounds really beautiful and spiritual and flowery, but I'm thinking, if anyone really knew the real me.
I know. Yeah.
So,
how many times has a preparation of a sermon or a teaching or a seminar just kicked you in the butt?
Yeah.
Because you were like, I am preaching this to myself more than anyone else.
I was invited. I took a couple of years off from travel, as you know, and I was out of practice. I mean, I'm speaking in the church that I pastor, and but as far as standing in front of a crowd and living in an airplane, I literally took 2 years off from doing that. And a friend said, "Hey, I want you to go speak at a soul care conference in Italy." So immediately, I'm in. You know,
the Lord says yes.
I'm in. Yeah. I don't have to pray about that. Jesus turned water into wine, and I'm coming to sample it in Rome. And good pasta, good pizza, good wine, good people. And I literally got up and I was scared. I mean, it's like you. I've spoken to crowds all over the place, but I was scared and I was worried. And I thought, what am I going to say about soul care? Because my soul was a mess at the time. And so instead of giving them 3 points, an intro and ending and something practical they can get away with, I just stood up and said, I have really nothing to give you tonight. So let me tell you what I'm working on. I'm hoping it's going to be effective in my life.
Yeah.
But I couldn't stand up there and say, these 3 things will work and this is what you should do. And from my experience, this is the remedy. I didn't have a remedy. And so I guess in some ways I was already implementing the, preach what you practice idea right then. But how far would that go in pastors' ministry, people's lives, if we could? I think it'd be really refreshing if we could just stand up and say, I have no clue. I don't know that I understand this. I'm studying it myself, but we're so afraid that we don't present well.
Yeah.
So instead of presenting well, if we present poorly, we just pontificate and I think try to fill in the gaps and make ourselves sound more mature or spiritual or gifted as better leaders than we really are. Have you ever struggled with that?
I guess I struggle with being seen as the expert when it comes to things all faith. Interestingly, Tim, I don't mind being considered the expert on junior high ministry, not because I think I am, but because I get that comparatively, me spending 27 years in junior high ministry at the same church and 4 years with collective 6th through 12th grade ministry. In addition to that I know more than most people do. So for whatever reason.
Hold on just a minute.
Okay.
You've been at Wooddale for 27 years?
Yeah. I started in December of 1996. So
see, I planted the church I'm in 1996. So I've been at the same congregation for 27 years.
Yeah. Wow.
So 2 things are true about you and I. We're both anomalies.
Yes.
And we're approaching dinosaur extinction.
I know my knees tell me that.
Yeah, my whole body
So,
tells me
I
that.
mean, talk about anomaly. I mean, to be in student ministry for that long is crazy.
Right.
To be in
Yeah.
junior high ministry that long is crazy. To be in junior high ministry at the same church, because you could find
Yeah.
people who are at the same church, but they've switched 3 different positions, you know, or they're planting in regards to that church or something. But yeah, it along with Katie Edwards, who now
Oh
from
yeah.
I've not
Hmm.
had a conversation with her in the last couple of months, but I understand she actually has moved to one of the teaching pastors at the Lake Forest campus at Saddleback. So I think she is officially. She used to say she led from the junior high chair, but I think officially she has moved on. But outside of her, I don't know anyone else who's at the same church for that long in junior high ministry. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't mind being considered the expert in that because I see how people would think that. I have a hard time in being seen as the person who's supposed to know everything when it comes to scripture, dinosaurs in the Bible, you know, um, end times, because I am not anywhere close to it. And I think you and I and anyone who's done seminary knows the more you learn, the more you know you don't know, and it's humbling.
I can explain my faith with fewer words today than I've ever could,
Mhm.
and I don't even have a need to explain it.
Yeah.
It's a real dichotomy. Is for I feel like with the experience, education, blah blah
Mm-hmm.
blah, you should be able to articulate things a lot more clearly.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. I think now I have more questions,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and at the same time, the questions that I think I have, I really don't care about.
Right. And even
It's
the
like
sta-
I
yeah, the stance I take much more loosely now. And you'd think it'd be the opposite. You would think I'd be more grounded and like, this is the way that it is. I believe from everything I've studied, this is what I believe, but I also understand that I could be wrong, that it could be,
yeah, I've got a friend who says it like I'm 100% convinced that I'm right and 100% convinced that I could be wrong.
yeah.
You know, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to teach it with certainty, but before I end, I'm going to let you know in no uncertain terms that I could have just fed you a whole line of garbage to puff myself up.
Yeah.
See, I think I have a different need, and I wish I could like. It's like my thorn in the flesh. I wish I could get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I know I'm not the expert, but then I know you know I'm not the expert, and I really kind of want to be the expert.
Oh, okay.
And that's just maybe compensating for what I know are my inadequacies and incompetencies.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I still feel like that 13-year-old eighth grade boy who's just vying
Mm-hmm.
for your attention to say,
Mm-hmm.
could you just notice me?
Mm-hmm.
And I really wish I could get rid of that, but I'm certain that I'm not the only person, only pastor. I know I'm not,
Yeah.
um, who feels that way. But I do know that I might be one of a few who's willing to get on a podcast and to admit it.
That's right.
Because what's it matter? I can continue to pretend and put on a mask and fake my way through
Yeah.
it. Because you only know me from a distance. You know me from a stage. You know me from a rare encounter at an
Yep.
event or a book or something like that. But you don't know me, and so I don't need to let you. I don't need to let you in. I'm happy for you to think what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And you said something in one of our recent conversations that, matter of fact, it was face to face at your birthday party. I was telling you about my sister-in-law, whose girls are attending your youth group,
Mm-hmm.
and who will be listening to this podcast, because I told her I'm going to have Heather on the podcast. She goes, let me know what it is.
Oh,
I said,
good.
well, you could listen to some other ones too. Heather's not the only good guest, right? And I was telling her that, we had a relationship. We didn't know each other well there, but I said, listen, she's an amazing youth worker. She goes, how do you know that?
Hmm.
I said, her reputation precedes her. She has a reputation. I said, well, it's not like that kind of reputation. She's, like she said, she didn't sleep with a lot of people before, not a lot of opportunity. So it's not that
That's
kind of
right.
reputation.
That's right.
I said, Heather's one of the most recognized junior high youth pastors in the country, in the world. I was sharing that with you, and you said, but that's not my identity. I really just love to be a good local church pastor. So you haven't fallen into a trap that I fall into. I think a lot of people fall into, of trying to become something, be something. And is that because you've, where does your self-assuredness, is it self-assuredness? Before I just assume that, I'm going to assume it's some level of self-confidence, self-worth, self-esteem, self-assuredness, any other self-hyphen thing I can think of to sound smart. Where does that come from? I don't have that. I don't have that. I'd like to say that I got my confidence in Christ. I don't always have my confidence in Christ.
Sure.
Did that come out of Bethel too? Has that been just cultivated? Did somebody pour into you? I mean, could you point to a person?
Oh, there were a lot that poured into me, but I think what you're referring to, and I think I might have even said it when we were talking, is that I'm glad your sister-in-law doesn't know that I have influence outside of Wooddale Church, because that's what I want. That's what I hope for. And I think some of it comes in the fact that I'm a developer, right? So in the Strengths Finders, my top 5 are communication, woo, positivity, developer, and activator. I love to have my own group. I love to pour in and see them little by little develop and develop. I have zero interest in being a full-time speaker or author. The idea of going and inspiring and have them fall in love with me, and then the only way I talk to them is through DM. I don't, that's not anywhere attractive for me. My heart is with the local church. And so I've told the Lord, I will, because of my high capacity for people and activity, I will do all of it as long as I can. But the minute I can't do it anymore, the other things go to the side, and I will only do the local church. So I think it's just in my makeup. I think it's in my makeup. And I too, of course we all do, Tim, struggle with moments when I take a good chunk of my value from the fact that my kids and my families love me and like me and think I'm pretty great. But I want to ask you this question. Do you think it's different for men? I know that pride is a human condition. Okay. But let me just throw out a couple observations that I've had in the last 3 decades. I am an anomaly in that I've stayed where I am for as long as I have. But I have had male counterparts, both within our ministry at Wooddale and other places, who've said, I'm in it. I'm in student ministries for the long haul. None of them are still in student ministries. They have all moved to campus pastor, church planning, something else. And I've wondered, is it a guy thing? Is there a layer of pride that men have in the Christian conservative culture, which is where I run? Is there this idea that a man has to continue to advance or he doesn't have skill or value? And then the other piece that was always curious to me, I had the opportunity to be a part of youth specialties and the core training team for about 8 years. And I loved it. It was my first national platform. Students are my favorite. So it was a big deal for me to go talk to adults because frankly, I just don't like them as much as I do teenagers. But I thought I convinced myself, Heather, the ripple effect, if every one of those people in that room touches the lives of even 10 kids each, just think of how many kids' lives will be touched because of what you're sharing to encourage them and empower them and equip them. So I did it. And it was really fun. And Tim, I will tell you, in every city, someone came up to me and said, hey, I just want to ask you, how'd you get to do this? Like,
Oh my gosh.
I've always wanted to do this. How did you do it? And it was always a man, always. And my answer, to which I say to this day, is honestly, I was doing what the Lord called me to do, and somebody noticed. Like, I never sent in a tape or a VHS or a script. I never did anything. I was emceeing a mega rally at Bethel University, and Helen Music, who was on the core training team at the time, came as one of our speakers. And I brought her up on stage and we chugged root beer for a belching competition. And I think that day I was doing a bring me kind of things. And I told the kids, bring me your biggest zit and let me pop it in front of everybody for a prize. And she left that day and she went back to Tick Long at Youth Specialties. And she said, you've got to see this girl in Minnesota. But I was just always curious. It was always a man. I want to do this. How did you get to do this? How did you get this platform? Will you, as an authentic pastor, will you talk about that?
I will. I'll take a stab at it. First of all, I haven't heard Helen's name in a long time.
Oh, you know Helen.
And
okay.
So, yeah, that's a nice memory.
Yeah.
My blink to your first question is yes. Now, but I can only speak to it as a male. I would have to speak to it from my own perspective of woundedness. I wrote about this a lot in my last book. It's called Alone Sucks, and which is really a loose translation of the Hebrew text in Genesis 2.
2:18. I'm very familiar. It's not good for man to be alone.
I can really hear God just saying, Adam, this sucks.
Yeah. Or Adam saying, God, this sucks. Yeah, I know,
this
Adam.
Sucks.
It does. It does, Adam.
Either way, I've added that phrase to the book of 3 Timothy, which is my favorite book to preach out of. I was the youngest of 4. I was the leftover of 4. My dad was a pastor and church planter. I lived in like 18 homes by the time I was 18. And some of those were just like a weekend someplace en route to someplace else, but it was constantly moving. But the more I talk to people, whether their story is the same as mine or not, and men in particularly, I mean, I'd be 100% honest, I don't have a lot of these conversations with women.
Sure.
I guard myself in that situation, and I want to listen, but I don't know that I can always obviously relate, right?
Sure.
I think it is an issue of pride, but I think more than that, it is an issue of, I wouldn't even say discovery. I'm going to say seeking validation.
Like,
am I really
conquering? Like, do I need?
I can't say it's conquering for me.
Okay.
And I may be delusional to not use the word conquering for myself. For me, it's validation. I'm constantly seeking validation. And if I can do one more thing, I can accomplish one more thing, then maybe I can be noticed for that one more thing. And so if I can raise or elevate my position in your eyes, then maybe I can artificially escalate it in my own heart. And I get the same question. I've had the question so many times. That's why I chuckled when you said it. How do I get to do what you do? And I've told, and they've all been male. I've never had a female go, "Hi, how do I get to be the keynote speaker at an event?"
Yeah.
I've never, I would say this honestly, I've never asked to be a speaker, a presenter. Matter of fact, since you mentioned Tick Long, I remember the day that Tick called me and he said, "Hey, you're going to be on the main stage at the National Youth Workers Convention with Tony Campolo. You're going to share a mic." What? First of all, I don't want to share a mic with Tony because he spits everywhere.
He does. You're right.
It's just like a soaked mic. And I don't say this with any false humility. I told him no. And this was a moment of my life where I felt like I was actually in a really good place. I said, "Tick, I want to be on that stage so bad because I think I've got something to say. but I'm going to say no until I don't want to be on that stage. And he said, well, the opportunity might not come up again. I said, I just don't feel comfortable with where I am right now, that it would just be me speaking out of desperate need of approval, as it would be that I really feel like I've got something valuable to say. And, you know, by God's grace, that opportunity came around again a couple times. And, but people ask, like, how can I do what you do? And I said, tell them the same thing. Just do what you do now.
Yeah.
Don't try to be noticed. Just do what you do. Be present. Give 100% to the assignment that you're in.
Yes.
And be content with it. If you're not content, and this is where the authentic piece comes in for me, if you're not content with where you are, what you're doing, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, that you're constantly vying for validation, then we need to do some real inner work and figure out what's the hole. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist or a counselor, but the whole idea of what's your wound? What are you carrying on with you? What have you never examined and explored and eradicated, or at least given to the Lord? In which sometimes I use that phrase, you use that phrase, and I don't always know that I can explain what that means. Like the last week I've been trying to give him stuff and I keep dragging it back, you know.
Right.
Pride. Is it pride? I think it comes from a place of emptiness. I think there's something missing. So I'm going to squeeze something else in there. Now, some people could obviously step into youth work and then move on to something different. And they just, assignments change, right? Our kingdom assignments change. I don't think that's the norm. I think it's a lack of satisfaction.
Okay.
I still think it's something internal that maybe we've carried with us for a very long time and we've buried. And if I can just continue to move on, you can't get close enough for me to have to deal with it or to recognize it in me. Or I can just, it's like I've got a sign on my wall. I'm looking at it and it says, I hate 10%. Excuse me, I hate 90%. Below it says finish 10%. Quite often in my life, I want to, I have a need to achieve.
Okay.
I don't have a need to achieve because I'm an achiever. I need to achieve because there's something I still carry at 53 years old in my life that I'm still trying to prove. So I don't know if it's pride or proving, or I'm not sure I have the answer to it, but I know what it is for me. And I feel like there's that gap for a lot of people, and maybe men in particularly. Like I said, my blink is to men. Yes. Yeah, I think it's true.
Okay. And certainly pride is quite a big net, right? Quite
sure.
Quite
yeah, there's a lot of things that fit in pride, right? No.
Yeah.
But
I have found that most women don't feel the draw to seek, to conquer, to prove, or to achieve. And I definitely have a contentment. I feel like I am in my sweet spot. I never feel God's delight, Tim, more than when I'm standing in the middle of a room full of students or on a bus full of junior hires. I mean, I feel his delight. And I don't need to try to find anything else outside of that in regards to ministry.
You know, Cindy would say the same thing. She's a middle school teacher. She's taught 7th grade for 35 years in public school.
Wow.
Which I always say tongue in cheek, I'm really thankful that she's a public school teacher because your tax dollars are going to pay for her mental health care soon.
Yeah.
She's got a benefit that you don't have as a public school teacher.
Yeah.
Someone's tax dollars going to take care of her in her old age. And or my mental health care. But I had the same question for her most of our marriage is, are you ever going to and I would use the word up. Are you going to move up? She's like, up? No. I love middle level.
Yeah.
I love these kids.
Yeah.
They're different. They're squirrely.
Yeah.
They don't know who they are. They're always
Yeah.
trying on like swear words,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
She said, and I never even punish them. I don't, it's like a whole string of vulgarity came out of their mouth. And she's like, it wasn't even good, can't even cuss well.
Uh-huh.
But she's never felt the need to move up on whatever. And, that's what we're finding with this authentic pastor project is a lot of pastors, male, female, are moving, they're transitioning someplace.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I'm hoping, though, is they're transitioning out of a place of health and wholeness.
Yeah.
Not out of emptiness and insecurity.
Yes.
And so for me, I think I transition a lot. And I'm not trying to have a false, like I said before, not a false sense of humility. I'm a whole lot more stable than I'm giving myself credit for. But you can't talk about authenticity unless, like, the podcast host talks about inauthenticity, or his inauthenticity. Yeah. I've been able to let that go more as I've prayed for contentment, but then I'm really seeking, like right now, in my 32nd year, I love ministry more than I ever have.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's not because it's necessarily easier.
Yep.
I quit doing all the stuff that doesn't bring me joy and contentment that I was doing.
Yes.
Instead of equipping saints for the work of service or preparing saints for service, I was so busy preparing services for saints, and I got the accolades and the recognition for that. Of Tim can do everything. He's been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
And I know the gifts God's given me, but now I've got a different team. I've built a different team around me, and I've let some things go. And it's so much better than having to think, I got to be on a plane. I got to do this. I've got to teach this. I've got to know this. I got to understand dinosaurs in the Bible and end times.
Yes.
I don't.
No, because there's somebody who loves that and has already done the research on it. And it would be their delight to teach it.
And when we quit pretending to be the expert and step out of the way, that gives somebody else, when we're talking about stepping in or out or up, that gives somebody else a chance to step into an assignment that we're the block for.
Yes.
Our anxiety or our lack of confidence isn't just ruining us, because it really is eating us alive. It's impeding somebody else's opportunity to discover, I'm really good at this. And I never knew it was. So they're trying to find their validation in something they're not good at.
Yeah.
Because I'm standing in the way.
Yes. Yeah.
That's and unfortunately, this will sound indicting. Unfortunately, I think that in so many ways has become an expectation of pastoral work. Especially in smaller churches, right? The average church, we're not all in Wooddales of 3,000 to 4,000 people, right?
Right.
Most are in churches of 150 to 250.
Yep. And those are considered large churches. Now, yeah.
And they really are a large church.
Tim, I think, I would think if you were a pastor in that setting, you would worry that people would think you were lazy or not doing your job. And,
what are you paying you for?
What it really is 1 Corinthians 12. I love 1 Corinthians 12 more than I love 1 Corinthians 13. And I know that's kind of heretical to say, but 2:18 or 12:18, God put together every part of the body just as he intended. And how fun is it to watch somebody work in the part of the body they were intended? I mean, people will compliment me for what I do. And I just say, listen, it's like I'm breathing. I don't even have to think about it. So thank you, but praise the Lord, because this is how he's gifted me. And to watch my friend Kathy work an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, Tim, it would take me 3 hours. And she does it in 20 minutes with a smile on her face the whole time and can sort it 7 different ways for me and make it look pretty. It's so fun to watch people exactly where God intended them to be. And boy, my heart is burdened for that senior pastor who feels the need to do it all because they worry that the congregation would think, what are we paying you for?
Well, I think there's two parts to it. I agree with you. Like there's an external factor, and part of this is the way that the church is evolved and the culture we live in, the consumer mindset.
Sure.
That is your job. This is your job description. And then there's the other internal piece of it that says I'm not good enough, so I'm
Yeah.
going to have to prove myself to you.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those are like, those are first cousins, right? First cousins should not marry.
They should not be
Right?
dating. No, they should not.
They should not be. They shouldn't even dance together. A
Yeah.
friend of mine, a few years ago, I had stepped into a position. I needed a board chairman. I had stepped into an organization that was, the amount of debt that it had was unbelievable. Why I was stepping into it, I don't know. I had friends try to counsel me out of it, and I told God when I took the job, I said I need a board chairman, because I wasn't going to work for the current board chairman. I was going to ask for their resignation. If I take the job, you have to quit, because I don't want to work for you. I want to work for the organization. I don't want to work for you. God sent me a board chairman who's a Fortune 500 CEO that I'd known. And so he called one day, and which was unusual. He's a very busy individual. He said, "What's your job description?" And so I went into some diatribe about I cast vision and I build teams. He's like, "No, click." He just hung up the phone. That wasn't the right answer. I knew that right away.
Yeah.
He called back a couple days later and he goes, "Hey, I hung up on you the other day." I said, "I noticed." "What's your job description?" And I gave him some other answer, same answer, different sentence structure. Yeah. "I don't have time for this." He said, "I'll call you back Friday." Click. There's 2 hang-ups in 1 week. Not good. Called me back on Friday. Goes, "Listen, let me tell you what your job is a CEO or a senior pastor or a pastor or a youth pastor or anybody who works with people. Your job is to release their potential. Period. Work yourself out of a job. If you work yourself out of a job, you'll always have a job. Because then you're no longer irreplaceable. You become indispensable. You're indispensable because you're the only person in their life who's seen beneath the surface and released their potential into some great opportunity where they could shine and feel content like you say you do. Like, I'm in my sweet spot. And why am I there? Because Heather put me here. Because I can do spreadsheets.
But boy, how counterintuitive is that, Tim?
Well,
work yourself out of a job by empowering other people to do it.
It's certainly countercultural of what we call leadership.
Yeah.
Most of the leadership books, and I'm not saying that there are some great leadership experts and authors who get it right, but I think it's hard to overcome the cultural mindset that I lead, I'm on a pedestal, I'm in charge, I know the answers, as opposed to just sitting down with your team and saying, "I don't have a freaking clue what we should do. But I'm assuming around this table, one of you or all of us together can do it." That just raises the respect that people have. And I think if pastors would do the same thing in the pulpit, but we're afraid. So that fear. So if you go back to the question you asked a minute ago, and I'm just putting this all together in my little crazy head. Is it pride? Maybe it's fear, Heather. Maybe it's fear that moves people on. Fear of failure. Stepping into the next thing before you finish something. Or I could be full of crap.
No. Well, wouldn't you say?
But I think it's fear.
I think fear fits under the umbrella of pride.
If it's in that net, right?
Yeah. Cousins, same family.
Yeah. Same inbred family.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're talking that way about so I'm picturing a senior pastor, and all of us, I believe, love to see our senior pastors be authentic, right? when our senior pastor talks about a struggle he has in his home or with his child or with his control issues or whatever, it makes us feel so good, and we like that. But I almost wonder, Tim, if there's a limit in my mind as a congregant as to how many times a year I'm comfortable with him doing that.
Oh, I don't disagree.
Versus him having a posture of that. Like, I'm not the expert. I don't know. I'm still learning, because I
right.
think
I don't want to
hear that.
I don't want to hear my pastor's garbage.
Yeah.
And their failures, but a posture of humility would go so much farther to enhance or cement that issue of authenticity. Do I think most pastors do that? I believe that most do, or at least most want to. But maybe don't always know how. These are things we don't, there's not, there's no national seminar on authenticity.
No.
The seminary class on authenticity. And it's not like a course you take, like this is your 13 weeks, you're going to be authentic. It's a culmination of all those little things, our humility, our openness, our honesty, our vulnerability, which none of those are necessarily authentic. Those are all, again, it's kind of like cousins, right?
Yeah.
It's all inbred, fits in one big net of authenticity. And I think some of that is as simple as saying, this is where God placed me, like you. I'm going to give it my best. This is the person in front of me. I'm going to give them my best. They're never going to wonder what I think. Because then I don't have to go looking for it someplace else.
Yeah.
So if I have to find my validation outside of my conversation with Heather, then that's going to be something I fill my life with, an element that's artificial. That's the filter on Facebook.
Well, and I want, one of my goals is that I want to continue to be a positive connection to the church for my kids. My favorite Sundays, Tim, are Christmas, Easter, and Mother's Day. Now, Christmas isn't always a Sunday, I know, but my favorite services, if you will, because all the kids come back. Because what does mom want? I just want my kids to be in church with me on whatever. So these kids come back. I've been there 27 years. My first 7th graders are 39. So they come back in with their kids, right? Their children. It's just nuts. And God has given me a beautiful memory for names and recall. And so I'll call a kid by name that's 27 years old, and I'll be like, Matthew, do you remember when we were on the snow camp bus? And I'll recall something. The Lord gives it to me. And Tim, it's just so fun to watch the face of that kid, but literally the mom next to him that's crying because she doesn't believe her son is walking with the Lord right now. And to see me call him by name and recount something, and to see his response to that, I just want, even if he's walked away from the church, even if he has doubt, I don't care. If he can recall back to that time on the bus, or the time that I made him feel like he was the only one, if he can have that positive piece back, that's a win. And it's not about me. It's helping him to see the bigger piece of the church and the bigger idea of Christian faith.
That's one of the worries that I have with, we see 1,500 pastors a month or whatever the number is leaving the ministry, and X amount of churches a month closing their doors, and a digital generation getting their information off their palm of their hand.
Yeah.
But information does not provide the connection you're talking about.
No.
It's that face-to-face, when you are in that conversation. It's, again, removing that doubt. I wonder how many times that, think about it this way for myself. I was seeking validation, hit 90%, move on to the other things, seeking and seeking and seeking. because I wasn't finding it inside. But what if I would have had a Heather Fleece in my life that when I was present, I mean, you're listening, you're responding, you're giving the person the validation they need, not just because of your presence, but your words. I watched you. I told you this. I watched you when my niece was reading at her grandmother's funeral a couple months ago. We're in this great big Catholic church, and you're sitting on the edge of your chair. She can't even see you. She can't see you, but you're on the edge of your chair, beaming with pride and joy. And anybody watching you knew that, I mean, that energy, call it energy, could be felt in the room. If any pastors listening are hearing any part of this, there's so many good things here. Not from me, from Heather. I think that's what this generation, I'm not talking about youth, I'm just talking about our culture, is being robbed of. And that's relationship.
Yeah.
Because you're going to change anybody. Sorry. I mean, you can put the most flowery sermon together. You can have an amazing presentation and stage show and band. And at the end of the day, they're going to remember the person who remembered their name.
Yeah.
And 27 years later, that student you're talking to, or 39 or whatever years, 39-year-old that was your first seventh grader, they don't remember your summer camp theme.
No, they don't.
They don't remember any of that stuff.
No.
They remember that every time I talked to Heather, she was like right there, just right there.
Yep. Or she came to my 8th grade musical.
Yeah.
I mean, you showed up, and that's what, I so badly want senior pastors to know. People, the pastoring that you do is not usually from the pulpit.
Yeah.
And
I wonder,
I
wonder if I won't do we things. I wonder if I isolate myself, sequester myself in my office to learn more, do more, polish, present, prepare, as a way again to inflate an emptiness, when what I really should do is deadbolt the office door. I used to tell youth workers this when I did youth worker training. The greatest thing I could do is to come to your church and padlock the youth room door and say, you still have the same amount of hours a week.
Yeah.
But you're not allowed to meet in a big gathering. Now what are you going to do with your 40 hours?
Yeah.
Spending time. I tell my staff at church that it's grounds for firing if you spend more than 25% of your paid hours in an office.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're really looking for. Authenticity breeds, in relationship is what cultivates transformation. And so I've seen that in you. In this conversation, just in phone conversations, in the brief time we've had, I've seen you do it with others as I've observed you a couple times just in the last couple of months, being all in. So I appreciate the example. And I don't say that patronizingly,
Thanks, Tim.
I need to learn that better. I got to quit preaching what I practice and start practicing, or excuse me, the other way around, instead of practicing what I preach. I need to start preaching what I practice.
Preaching what you practice.
Isn't that good?
It's so good.
That good?
I'll be writing it down.
Think that's original with me, right?
I'm going to quote you. You're the one I heard it from.
Yeah,
I'm going to quote you.
Quote it. Hey, this Eldred guy is so smart. Listen to this new quip he come up with.
I hope I just don't accidentally quote it by Tim Keller, because that would be a bummer, because he gets enough quotes.
Or Tim Keller, Tim Elmore, I've been asked to sign, books by guys like that. I'm like,
boy.
Thank you for your Habitudes books. I'm like, you're welcome. You're welcome.
I wish I had the royalties for them.
Yeah, I wish I would have written all 12 of those, But no, Someone put that on Facebook just maybe a month ago or so. They disagreed with something I said vehemently, and I replied. I don't usually try to reply, but I replied with a little smart aleck response. They said, well, we'll just have to agree to disagree, but I'll never forget using your Habitudes books for our leadership event for our kids. And I just let it go. Just let it go. If you want to think you're talking to Dr. Tim Elmore, knock yourself out. Because I'm authentic and I'm going to lie about it. So, just so that you don't feel bad. Well, hey, you and your halo have been welcome on the Authentic Pastor Podcast. Thanks.
You. Thanks for having me. And thanks for doing what you're doing. Wouldn't it be awesome if the next 2 decades in specific were filled with pastors who were willing and congregations that received authentic pastors? I love it.
Well, it's a team effort. So thanks for adding to it. Hey, 2 days from now is Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
Yeah,
yeah. I like to say I have produced a lot of children and don't have the growth marks to show it.
Nope.
Stretch marks.
They're not yours, but you've got thousands of them.
Yeah.
You've got thousands of them. So that you have touched. Only mothers could touch their, biological children the way you have.
Nice.
So
thanks. Awesome.
We'll be in touch. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, friend.